Thank you. Evening, everyone. I have a friend up here who, I don't know, has a taste for the decadent things in life. And every so often, he drives 5 hours to Montreal from here and has 3 dinners that night. He sleeps in and he has dinner at probably 5 and 8 and 11 or something like that. And he'll do this for 2 or 3 days. and I feel like we get 2 dinners tonight. This is my that was a full meal, and now I guess I don't know. We'll see what tastes. We'll see where we are. It was delicious, and I wanna start. Unusually, I just want to start with a poem because it's a poem in a way both about what Allison was saying about transmission and the kind of standing at the mouth of the source and tasting the fresh spring water. But it's also a poem about healing songs. And so in a way it's for Eduardo too, but it's for all of us. It's a Seamus Heaney poem called At the Wellhead. He says, your songs, when you sing them with your 2 eyes closed, as you always do, are like a local road we've known every turn of in the past. That midge-veiled, high-hedged side road where you stood looking and listening until a car would come and go and leave you lonelier than you had been to begin with. So sing on, dear shut-eyed one, dear far-voiced veteran. Sing yourself to where the singing comes from. Ardent and cut off like our blind neighbor who played the piano all day in her bedroom. Her notes came out to us like hoisted water raveling off a bucket at the wellhead, where next thing we'd be listening, hushed and awkward. That blind from birth, sweet-voiced, withdrawn musician was like a silver vein in heavy clay. Night water glittering in the light of day. But also just our neighbor, Rosie Keenan. She touched our cheeks. She let us touch her braille in books like books' wallpaper patterns come in. Her hands were active, her eyes were full of open darkness and a watery sheen. She knew us by our voices. She'd say she saw whoever or whatever. Being with her was intimate and helpful, like a cure you didn't notice happening. When I read a poem with Keenan's well in it, she said, I can see the sky at the bottom of it now. And that line, there are a number of lines in this, but that line about sing yourself to where the singing comes from, that feels a lot like what we're doing when we come here. You breathe yourself to where the breathing comes from, or you cry yourself to where the crying comes from, or you listen yourself to where the listening comes from. And not unlike that woman playing alone You can feel you're playing alone in your room, but the whole universe is shining from your eyes. And it's interesting when we do, I was talking to someone today, when we do these online retreats, it's very easy at the beginning to feel like you're in your little square room. And if you try to connect out like this, it doesn't work so well. But if you go in here, you somehow can feel everything and everyone, and eventually the entire universe is right in here, all that rain falling. But people delude themselves and go chasing after things. And in a way, that's us at the wellhead with our bucket that we're lowering down into the source, whatever way it begins to come to us. But we sit here day after day and we just lower our bucket. And we wait. We wait to see what clear waters rise. And I suspect you've noticed by now, I was noticing today, I was taking a little nap. And we've had ice here. And so there's ice on my roof that was starting to melt today. And every so often it just sounds like there's an avalanche going off in the house. And I wake up and the cats wake up and just think, what the hell is going on? But it happens enough times that just like everything else, it just becomes part of the rain. The vacuum cleaner becomes the rain. The breathing becomes the rain. Everything just becomes the rain. And pretty soon, there's nothing not included in whatever the rain is. And I don't know, I was noticing this retreat. I guess this is true of practice in general, but it somehow seems to be up that we're talking about rain, but we're also talking about intimacy and how we let the world in and touch us. And that's true of rain, like John was saying last night about the old teacher who said there's no hurry, the rain's everywhere. But it's also true of music, which I think is why the song thing was on my head. The first time I really remember that feeling of being dissolved in something or sort of beginning to lose my sense of borders was going to concerts. And I always remember going to see a concert with a friend of mine, and the louder the music would get, the more and more still I would get, because I could just feel myself begin to dissolve. And for my friend, the way that the world moved through her, the louder things would get, the more she had to move. And she would just look at me like I was absolutely nuts, and I would look at her like she was absolutely nuts. But it in a way, it doesn't matter how it comes to you, that you begin to dissolve your usual borders and feel part of things. And you hear in Zen a lot, you swallow the whole universe. And it's not really in that devouring way that my friend is swallowing his 3 dinners. It's more like you just realize that, I don't know, it's always been here. It's always been inside. You couldn't have gotten rid of it even if you wanted to. And it's a kind of intense relief that comes with those borders. It's frightening at first, but I remember just getting a taste for it. And I must have had a taste for it earlier than I thought, because apparently when I was a little kid, I wore out 3 records, 3 of the exact same record, because I just kept wanting to. There must have been some song. And embarrassingly, I think it was like a country song called She's Single Again or something like that. Hold on to your men. She's single again. But for some reason, I liked the beat of this thing. And so I would make my parents play it over and over and over and over till I wore out the records. But that feeling, just the feeling of being surrounded by something and that you're free inside of it. And it may come from music with you, it may come with nature, it may come with being with little kids, it may come with, lying in your bed, it may come with, but you start to get some kind of, certainly comes with any amount of meditation, you start to get some kind of feeling that your borders are not as sure as what you thought they were. And I bet you've noticed, like, even if you just put your attention, if you closed your eyes and just touch anything right now. Today, when I was sitting, one of my cats really likes meditation, and so he came to sit with me under my rakasu, and he was breathing, and I was breathing, and pretty soon I had no idea whose breath I was feeling. There was just movement. Then there wasn't even movement, there was just whatever there was. And the opposite of that somehow is when we're always trying to reinforce our borders. And it's sneaky sometimes. Sometimes it's not so sneaky. I was at the grocery store the other day, and it was right before this big snowstorm we were about to get, and so it was very busy. And there was a woman there, and I was waiting in line, and all I heard her say to someone who worked there was, "Can you just show me where the regular ice cream is? None of this goat stuff." And she's saying this as loud as she, like, clearly this is a real problem that there's goat stuff and that she can't find the real ice cream. And I'm watching the woman kind of walk with her and, yes, I can show you. And then when she comes back, she gets her little thing of ice cream and there's a long line. And she immediately starts sort of, announcing to everyone, well, um, it's a long line today, isn't it? And by the way, they're very slow here. And she's kind of, and you can feel everyone kind of shrinking into their little square as she's doing this. And the more that that's happening, the more that her square is actually trying to, she's reinforcing and taking up more space with her um, assertions. And it was sort of it was terribly funny to me because we were, it was like a little Broadway show as we were waiting in line, which was great because it was long. But I could see in her, there was both like fear that she kind of knew she was being a little obnoxious, but the more slightly obnoxious she became, the more justified then that she had to be in what was happening. So she kind of doubled down each time. And I could feel like there's not really a problem, but somehow she's making one over the most of, I don't know, does she just not? What I kept what is the problem exactly? I'm lost. Maybe I don't know, this store very well or whatever it is. But it just made me think how, like, the contours of the self is what we're interested in a sense, when we're studying all this. And they're completely bogus for the most part, but the more you shore them up, the more certain that they try to be. And they might not be sort of as blatant and obnoxious as a regular ice cream woman. They may be something like asserting that I'm a really nice person, or that I've been having to look at apartments recently, and I notice how much it's hard for me if there's a really ugly apartment. Like, I want to find something nice about it, or I want to find, like, it's hard for me to just. And my partner's great because she'll just look at me and say, this is hideous. And I'll be, well, no, it pains me. It goes against my idea of myself to just say, especially if someone else, might be there, they're going to think, I don't know, I'm judging. So whatever it is, it might be that, I don't know, I'm a really good listener, or that I'm really sensitive, or that What else? I'm sure you guys could help me come up with some. I think deeply about things. I can't handle people talking to me before I've had my coffee. I mean, whatever it is, like whatever certainty exists, you have to be committed to it to keep it going. Otherwise, it just starts to fall apart on you, which is usually what happens about at this time in retreat. It starts to fall apart on you and you want to grab for something. Um, and I guess what's interesting is that when the borders get breached, like if you can bear it for 3 seconds that they get breached and the world maybe isn't the way that you think it is, very interesting things can happen. Like, um, there's a story in my family about when my stepdaughter was a little girl and they tried to give her ice cream for the first time. And as soon as it touched her, she immediately rejected it and spit it out and wanted nothing to do with it until it actually touched her taste buds. And then you could see, everything sort of calculating inside. Wait a second, this isn't what I thought it was. And then she said, more, more. And funny how much temperature is a thing with this. You know, you think you don't like being cold till you actually go outside, and then it's kind of interesting and alive, and your cheeks get red, and you think you don't like being warm, or you think 100,000 things that you like or don't like. Um, and I guess the interesting thing is what happens when they start to dissolve. How committed are you to them? And we've been talking a lot about sound. That sound is one of those things that can enter us that we think we may like or not like till it all dissolves into rain. But the other thing I was really noticing about intimacy is in Zen, we talk so much about seeing, but as if seeing were just relegated to the eyes. You see with much more than your eyes. There are actually interesting, strange stories of blind painters that can feel pigments with their hands and begin to construct the world that they can be part of. And so, no matter what we're talking about, we're just talking about getting more intimate with things. And in this koan, we've been working with, in some way, the teacher saying, what if you let go of rain? What if you let go of it being rain? What if it's just whatever it is? And there's another koan that's intimacy from a slightly different angle I've been thinking a lot lately, because it says, it's a shame to want a light. There's no oil in the house. I have a way to bless poverty. You just feel your hands along the wall. And part of why I've been thinking of it is I've been noticing we're definitely in a time of no oil in the house. There's no knowing what's going on. And saying rain, saying anything, putting it into a concept, I've noticed generally makes it worse. Not sure if you have. But when I somehow stay intimate with my actual being and my actual life, and I don't try to have a concept or explain it to myself or explain it to anyone else, or in fact, I've even kind of noticed, like, No, there's almost a fasting quality of, I don't want any clever explanations about things. Don't want any fancy ways of thinking about it. I just want to be kind of in it. And that somehow seems to help. And the notion of poverty in Zen, it's really about you're not carrying anything. You're empty of ideas, you're empty of conceptions, you're empty of anything that creates any distance whatsoever. We did that koan in the open temple a few weeks ago about, I'm just a poor person of the way. When I breathe in, I don't live in the world my mind makes. When I breathe out, I don't get caught up in the world of cause and effect. This is turning the sutras 100, 1,000, 100,000 times. And there's some way in which that giving in to feeling my hand along the wall, the blindness and poverty that comes with just opening myself to experience, gets quieter. All the assertions about myself, or ice cream, or anything else, just get quieter. I'm less certain about anything. There's a freedom in that. There's a genuine openness. And it's interesting because I was the guy who came up with this saying. I mean, we hear in this practice that what's happening in our own world is not so different from what was happening in the world of the ancestors, in the world by which we receive this transmission. But the more you look into it, it's not like there was this one time of upheaval and then this beautiful tradition and then everything sort of went along nicely. It's like, really upheaval after upheaval after upheaval. Like by the time this guy came around, it was the 1500s in China, and there was yet another upheaval and rebellion. And this guy's name was Yin Yuan Long Qi. And he lived in the early 1600s in China. And it was a time, in a certain way, not very much unlike our own, where there was a stronghold of who he was happy to have in charge. And then there was an onslaught of the people that he would prefer not to have in charge. And his life, he came to the Dharma in kind of an interesting way. He had lost his father. And when he went, he told his mother, I don't really want to get married. Could you just give me the money for traveling instead? And she wasn't super keen on that idea, but went for it. And he found his way to the Dharma instead. But the Dharma at that time was really like lectures on the sutras, except for there were a few Chan people kind of making their way back who did proper Chan, and they were trying to resurrect the shouting and hitting, which he thought much preferred. And so it took him a while, but he finally found his way to a teacher, and who was another Yuan Wu, not the Yuan Wu of the Blue Cliff Record, but another Miyun Yan Wu. And they were really trying to get the scene going again, but it was difficult, and he kept getting invitations to go to Japan, because there was a Chinese contingent in Japan as well. and he was friends with the loyalists, the people he was trying to protect. He was friends with the general, and so the general was able to help smuggle him across to Japan because it wasn't looking so good for Buddhism in China at that time. And his story goes on from there. And what's interesting, there are a few things interesting about it I just thought worth mentioning. One is that the masters of the time, not unlike us, were deeply entwined with the world. They had their places of refuge, and his particular temple in China was a refuge for the stronghold that he was trying to protect, a spiritual refuge. But they were very much moving with the times they had. They weren't up away from them. And there are all sorts of debates about why he went to Japan. Was it to protect himself? Was it because there had been a divine prophecy? Was it because dragons ushered him across the sea? Was it because red lights appeared that? And the best thing is you think, well, actually, it doesn't matter. The Tao was just going that direction. It's just marketing, like at some point. But all the forces were ushering the tradition along. And in a way, he was brave enough to move with that. And, sort of taking his life in his hands at different points. And then by the time he gets to Japan, they said, nah, we don't think you're legit. You're not a real Rinzai person. And so he ended up starting his own Rinzai adjacent school. But I notice in my own life right now, it is absolutely impossible to know where we're going. And the times in my life I have felt most that way, it's because I have not been able to conceive yet of what might appear on the other side. It's not even, I can worry myself to death. I can worry till the place where worrying comes from, or imagine to the place where imagining comes from. But I remember right before the pandemic having this, for several months before, having this overwhelming feeling that something was coming. But because I didn't have any conception, I really thought about that only in terms of my own life. So I kept imagining all these incredibly wild, elaborate scenarios, and I kept saying, something's happening, something's happening. But I could not have possibly conceived of anything that came after that, better, worse, or other. And it's actually like great. We're here as a result. There are many difficult things. There are many beautiful things. There are many all the things. But I have a way to bless poverty. Like what he says, I have a way to bless poverty. Not just like I have a way to get by, or I have a way to get through this. I have a way to bless the not knowing, to just feel my hands along the wall. And in a way, whatever sense you have, I remember a woman who married me actually saying that touch is the last sense to go. She said, if you see older people, touch them. That's the last thing to go. And it's the way by which we realize we're part of the world. All the senses. See how we're doing. See if I have anything more I want to say about any of this. Nope. It's a shame to want to light. There's no oil in the house. Thank you very much, everyone. Feel your way along the wall.